You are listening to the daily homily for Magdala in the Holy Land.
Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd followed him because they saw the signs he was performing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. The Jewish feast of Passover was near. When Jesus raised his eyes and saw that a large crowd was coming to him, he said to Philip, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" He said this to test him, because he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough for each of them to have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good are these for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people recline." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place. So the men reclined, about 5,000 in number. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were reclining, and also as much of the fish as they wanted. When they had had their fill, he said to his disciples, "Gather the fragments left over, so that nothing will be wasted." So they collected them and filled 12 wicker baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves that had been more than they could eat. When the people saw the sign he had done, they said, "This is truly the prophet, the one who is to come into the world." Since Jesus knew that they were going to come and carry him off to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain alone. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
This is just the beginning of the story. And we will have more of the story through next week. So this is a long story in chapter 6 of John's Gospel. I see it will be even on Friday and actually on Saturday next week, and today is Friday. And then the following Monday, we're also with the Gospel of John, but then in chapter 10. And it's interesting that John's Gospel accompanies us around Christmas time and also in Easter time, because John's Gospel penetrates very deeply the mystery of the Incarnation. And also, he treats the Passion, Death, and Resurrection as a book of glory, of Christ in his glory. Even the crucifixion is a glorification and exaltation. And it's pretty well commonly known that John's Gospel, the first part after the prologue, is the book of signs, with 7 signs and 7 big statements Jesus makes, "I am," and they are connected. Especially this one is very connected because afterwards Jesus will say, "I am the bread of life," after multiplying the loaves. So we're in a very central part of the gospel. Another little thing I was reading up on today about this way of John's presentation of the gospel is he's reflecting on the deeds of Elisha the prophet, the successor of Elijah. And in that sense, in John's Gospel, Elijah is presented like John the Baptist preparing, and Elisha has a double portion of his spirit that he requested when Elijah was taken up at the Jordan. And this is also part of the geography of John's Gospel with Jesus and John the Baptist. So we have a lot of background to this, and there's a story of Elisha with 100 prophets, and there are 20 barley loaves, and there's left over, even though it seemed that it wouldn't be enough at all for 100 people. So 20 loaves and 100, and they were left over, even though the 20 wouldn't be enough for the 100. They probably needed 1 or 2 each. And here we have 5,000 people, not 100, and we don't have 20 barley loaves, we only have 5, and a couple of fish. And there we see clearly also the representation of Jesus in the taking that story of Elisha to another level. God's doing is always growing in our lives. And that's hopefully the path of our spiritual growth, just like God's people is growing, not just numerically, but also in understanding the mystery. Even in very hard times, it's pretty well recognized that God's people grew spiritually very profoundly during the time of exile, during the time of difficulty. And if we're going through times of difficulty, it's not because God doesn't know us and is not with us and accompanying us, but he's taking us deeper into his mystery. And so we have this, so many other points we could see here, just Jesus' style. Jesus could fix the whole thing and God could have done it from heaven, but God chose to do a path of incarnation, calling a person like Abraham and progressively entering into human culture, human life, and becoming present. That's also part of the great logic of all the readings we have now in Easter. First of all, we had the apparitions where Jesus is present among his disciples. He shows them his wounds, he eats with them, he prepares breakfast for them. So many different occasions. And now in the weekday readings, we're already finished all those readings of Jesus appearing, and we're experiencing how Jesus continues to be present with us. And that's especially the meaning of John chapter 6. He is present with us through the Eucharist, and for that we gathered this evening to enjoy the extraordinary blessing of the Eucharist. So we have a lot of background here to get us into this mystery. I don't want to not comment on Gamaliel. I just love this character. He was the teacher of St. Paul. And here before Paul's conversion, so Paul is still Saul, and Gamaliel is asking the community for the leadership for serenity, not to be passionately blinded by one concern, one-track mind, but to take into account the whole picture. Also to take into account that they don't have dominion of the situation, God does. And anybody in leadership, even parents with a problem child or grandchild, a neighbor, a co-worker, maybe there's a very big problem. We try to fix it, we try to apply means, but we're not in control. There's a mystery happening in every soul, in every person. And Gamaliel seems to have this broadness of mind, this largesse of heart, to leave space for God to be working out his plans and his mystery, even in these new, bothersome Christians we don't understand, these followers of the way. They don't figure it out, they haven't figured it out, but they can't control it. They cannot go against their own principles and law. They cannot work on subjective impressions. They need to examine the case more clearly and more prudently. And it's wonderful to have this type of voice. And in a way, St. Athanasius of Alexandria was like this. He was a man of extraordinary wisdom, learning, and a great heart, a very broad heart, and an extraordinarily dedicated man to the teaching of a faith.
Thank you for joining us today. If you want to learn more about Magdala, follow us on YouTube and on Facebook.